Cheney telling me that she had kids from, like they'd bring workers up from the south.
Right.
And they worked there on
I had her for one of my English teachers. And
this is when she taught out there at the Brown School, you know. The one we moved to the...
And then third grade, I had a Mrs., her name was Plock, and then she got married, and I think it was Lockwood, and then I had a Mrs. Thompson for fourth grade, and I had Ellen Shear for fifth.
Oh, God, Ellen taught for ever, did
And I had her for Sunday school.
Well, you know, my son, I think, had her. We have a son, 41 years old, and I think he had her the last year she taught. Because I remember he used to kind of fuss about her. She was getting a little
That was
cranky.
The year we moved to down to VE when I had her in fifth grade. She had me in fifth grade. And then I had Mrs. Hockenberry, Mrs. Hopkins. You know Jim Hopkins.
Yes, Mary. Yeah.
Well, I had his wife in sixth grade. Her name was Hockenberry then. And then I got up into the junior high, and of course I had several teachers then each year.
Good gracious.
Oh my gosh, that doesn't do something to you, does it? When you go back and start thinking of all these names and dates.
Do you think any one of your teachers had a big impact on your life?
Oh my gosh. Mrs. Hockenberry, or Mrs. Hopkins it was then. She started me in getting, she would read to us, and she did a lot of Jack London's outdoor books, Call of the Wild and all that. So I thought, well, there can't be too much wrong with that, and the kids we liked it. So when I started to teach, excuse me, and I had this one man down at Miami, and I imagine he's been gone now a while, a man named Robert Sinclair. And he gave us all these authors to list, and I have still got all the notes that I took in his class.
For heaven's sakes. Now, what are you going to do with those?
Well, I'll tell you what I did with them. We had, let's see, Hawthorne, Irving, Poe, Mark Twain, Pearl Buck.
You're amazing.
And a whole lot of poets,
That tumor didn't affect your mind, did it?
No. Oh, no. This seems like it to some people. And I wouldn't have gotten rid of that. I've still got the notes. So when I started to teach, I think it was Mr. Johnson I had for a principal that year. I said, now I've got and I showed them to him. And I said, could I use those for my kids? And give him the note. Oh, he said, right. He said they'd be using those later on. I said, this is what I thought. So I spent, at least 3 weeks giving these kids these notes. And I said, now don't throw them away. I'll guarantee you'll need them when you get on from here. These were 7th graders, I believe. If they weren't, they were 8th grade. But anyway, I said, you're going to need them in high school, I'll bet you.
Now, you said Mary was your 5th grade teacher?
Mary Hockenberry? Yes. No, 6th grade.
What was her name?
Her name was Hockenberry at the time. Hockenberry.
Okay.
Now, she had a couple daughters, didn't she, I believe? And I can't think of their names. I believe she had 2 daughters.
So she was kind of an outstanding teacher.
Oh, yes. Well, Ellen Shear was, because we did it in geography. She did a lot of projects, and I wasn't too bad at drawing maps. And I remember making a big map of South America that we could use for products or produce, or the stuff that they raised in different countries. And so I had that. And my cousin Fred, who's down in Beaver Creek, I think now, and Uncle Kenny had gone to the service, and so every night, for whatever length of time he was gone, Aunt Mary Alice, and you know then about a Claude Ryder out on Peters?
What was it, Mary? What was her? Anna Ryder.
Anna, she was active in the garden clubs and so on. Well, that was Aunt Mary Alice's parents. And I don't know whether she was born out there on that farm.
Now, wait a minute here. So, Mary
Alice Ryder
was
my aunt by marriage.
Ryder. Now, who was her husband?
Kenneth.
Okay.
That was Dad's younger brother.
Married Kenneth.
And when Uncle Kenny went to the service, then Aunt Mary Alice and Fred would come in and eat supper with us every night, because that saved her having to do, well, we like to
Now,
do it.
they're all gone, aren't they?
Every one of them.
You have call on line 2, please.
Okay.
This is Smiling line 2.
That was
Every one of
your
them.
dad's sister.
Yeah.
Okay. And,
Well, didn't your first relatives live over here south of 40? Isn't there a Booher cemetery there south of the dam?
Yes.
Is that relevant?
No, I don't know any of them, but it is, yes.
Yeah, I figured it probably
Yeah,
was.
back on a hill back
Yes,
in there. Okay,
right,
but
up
I don't.
above the Rangers.
You got, all right, that's the one, but I can't tell you who they are.
Well, there was another
Right up here.
family buried in there. I went around and took pictures
Yeah.
of all the
who was
cemeteries.
your doctor? Do you remember the first doctor in Vandalia?
Well, now, I
Which
don't
doctor?
know, I didn't know him, but there was a Dr. Riley across the
Yeah,
street from
yeah.
where we used to live uptown. And I think mother and grandmother used him for when they needed a doctor.
He was the
Who was
first,
the doctor when you were born?
There was
You
a,
said Wilhelmina was your,
well, she was the nurse that came in to, now I'm trying to think whether Dr. Smith was, no, not the one that's there in town
no,
now.
that'd
doctor,
be-
we went to E.W.
E.W.
Wallace.
Smith.
Yeah.
Wallace Smith.
Yeah, I think that was the
Had
one.
his, the last
Yeah.
office he had was up there at
North of, on the north,
north
yeah,
side, east
yeah,
side of town.
right.
Okay, so that was probably your doctor.
I think that was the one.
Yeah, see, Riley was the first public health officer.
That could have been, but
And
I
they,
didn't know him, but I just know the name from here
Did
and
you go to
there.
Dr. Cliff for a while?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we
Oh,
were
yes.
talking about you.
Well, and I went to Dr. Weldy, too.
Okay, yeah, well, they started in together.
They went into Weldy, Kurth, and Lindauer, I think it was.
Yeah,
And then Dr. Weldy was married to Adelot. What was her name? She had a sister,
I don't,
Margie, but Margie
I can't
married a
remember what
Hertline. What was her name? But they lived down across from the elementary there in Merlin Heights, on whatever street that goes back there.
Rhinewood.
Yeah. And
yeah.
I know they had a daughter, Linda. I don't know, she's probably married and has a family now. But, what was her name? Anyway, Dr. Weldy's wife, and I know it just as well as I know my own, but I can't. She'd been a nurse.
Eileen, no.
Eileen,
Eileen.
that's the
Okay,
one,
Eileen.
yeah. So she said their older daughter needed some help in English. Well, she needed help with some of her school subjects. Would I help her? And I was trying to make up my mind about whether to be a teacher, and I had a lot of teachers, my cousins had been a lot of teachers. So I said, sure. So I went down there, a couple times a week to help her with her school subjects. And I'd had a Miss Bayshore in 8th grade English, and she gave us a lot of Pearl Bayshore.
That name sounds familiar. Was she
yeah.
there a long time?
Years.
Now, wait a minute, you graduated in,
I graduated in 51, high school in 51.
God, would she have been there in the 70s?
Oh my gosh.
Would she have been?
Well, wait a minute.
When my daughter was in school, my
I don't know.
60s?
That's only 20 years.
Well, if you graduated in, what'd you say,
In
55?
51 from high school.
51.
Where'd I write that down?
But she gave us so many interesting,
You graduated from college in 55.
yeah.
51?
51 was when I graduated from Butler.
I thought I wrote that down somewhere,
But she gave us so many interesting, easy way to remember things, because I remember in 6th grade, they had started to give us prepositions in English, and I hadn't the vaguest idea what they were talking about, and I'll be real honest with you.
I don't
And they
think they
said
teach that kind of stuff anymore, the way kids talk.
Well, and they said they were words that showed relationship between their object and some other word in the
Oh,
sentence.
God, listen at her, Phil.
And I can say it now. I couldn't then. And I thought, you got to be kidding. And it made no sense to me whatsoever. But when I got to Miss Bayshore, she said, now, we're going to talk about prepositions.
If Mrs. Bayshore was there.
Oh,
but
she was a
there.
good
I
teacher.
tell you, sure sounds
Yeah, it
familiar.
And I can't think whether she was from up around Bradford someplace. But anyway, she said, now there's an easy way to remember prepositions. And I thought, sure there is. And so anyway, she said, now there's only about 6 or 8 you'll have to remember. But the easy way to remember them is, take the sentence, the mouse ran blank the box. And whatever fits the blank will be a preposition. The mouse ran up the box, down the box, across the box, through the box, if there was a hole on each side. After he once gets inside the box was one, outside was one.
Outside, those are prepositions.
Oh yeah, the mouse ran inside the box, the mouse ran outside the box, the mouse
Well, now, I
ran...
would think those would be adjectives or adverbs.
They could be,
How, when, or
if they're
where, or
used,
place.
if they're used alone, then they become
Okay.
adverbs.
Depends on, oh,
And,
gee, we're getting an English lesson.
Yeah.
Oh,
We weren't
goodness.
planning on that, Phil.
No, I was
And I'm
never good
not
at English.
charging you for that either.
Okay, well, that's
And,
good.
and off the box, and beneath the box, beside the box, inside, outside, underneath, beneath, beyond, away from, away.
The
Then
only
there's,
thing I remember about things like that at school when we took typing, to use all the letters, the lazy brown dog jumped over the sly old fox
Right.
or something like that. I
well,
believe I'll
and
be
then
right.
when we came up with dividing the alphabet into 4 quarters, and I thought, well, you can't divide 26 into 4 equal parts. And I thought, well, now this is ridiculous, because I looked at the quarters, and the first one started with an A, the second one started with an E, the third one started with an M, and then the last one started with an S. And I thought, now how I got to remember this to teach it. So my dad always taught me to remember, if I said, if you can, AEMS. And I
That
thought,
makes
well,
sense, doesn't it?
and
Doesn't
he
even say a word.
no,
that you could
so
remember.
he always said, if you make up something stupid, you'll
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
something
right.
dumb longer. So I told the kids, I said, now I have to learn this too, so I said, here's how I'm remembering it. Always eat mustard seed.
Okay,
And the kids
you
just
sound
look-
like A-E, yes, I gotta write this down.
Right, AEMS.
Well, no, wait a minute.
Always eat-
Well, no, wait a minute.
Alphabet quarters.
Alphabet, quarters.
Quarters.
I never heard of that.
I never did either till I saw
And,
this in the reading workbook.
Oh,
Always eat
God,
mustard
this is
seed.
crazy. Always eat. Here's bad. You know Ruth Martin?
Oh, what?
I was a teacher in
Martin.
Ruth Martin.
No.
She was a fourth grade teacher.
grade.
Our Jim had her.
Oh.
And she would give them word associations, you know, to remember stuff. And I think her house number and her phone number was close. I can't even remember what they are now. But anyhow, our son is in New York City, and they were going to go up there to visit. And she always liked Jim, and she wanted his phone number just to ask him about some places to go and theaters and stuff. And he said, Mom, he said, when Ruth Martin called me, and she says, now I'll give you my phone number. He said, all of a sudden I was just back in the fourth grade, and I remembered her phone number.
Oh, my
Remember
gosh.
phone number?
Oh.
I always thought that was
Well,
so
and the
funny.
kids on these prepositions, I said, now, the kids said, are we going to have to name those? I said, yes. I said, I'm probably going to ask you to name at least 30, and the kid, they get this stricken look on their face.
Why did they divide it though? I didn't.
I don't know. I never heard
I
of it,
never
and
heard
I've
of that.
never read it since, except in this one reading workbook.
And they did it to teach the alphabet.
Yes,
And this would have been in the,
this was in the 50s.
but I mean, what grade were you in?
Oh, junior high, 7 and 8.
Junior high. You should
Yes,
have known all about the alphabet before then.
but not for quarters. I never heard of
Well,
it being
I
divided.
know, that's what I mean. Why
Well,
would they start?
I don't have any idea, and I've never seen it since in any of the workbooks.
I've never heard of it. course, that's no fun,
So-
but
It may have been one of those things that the,
Well,
this might have been a certain teacher.
I don't know.
well, or
I
the
don't know.
superintendent or somebody.
But,
that said, "This is
Well, you
what
know
we're gonna
nowadays,
do."
these proficiency tests are driving everybody crazy.
I hear this on the news now, that they said the proficiency test is time to take them.
We talked to Barb about it, she just,
Oh,
they have to gear the whole school year around those things.
Right,
And
yeah.
there's a big controversy about them, whether they should even maybe, are you getting too
no,
tired?
no,
Yeah,
I'm
you
just
got time.
moving my
We don't
foot
want to
here.
wear you out.
No, that's
Your
all right.
your
I'm
head will
just
be
moving-
swimming after we leave here.
No, that's all right.
You'll be
I'm
thinking
not-
about all these things you should have told
I'm
us.
enjoying this, I'm enjoying this.
Well,
So, and then the kids said, now that's an awful, when we did these authors, they said, now that's an awful lot of, oh, I just thought of something else. I said, it's an awful lot of material to remember. How are we going to remember it? I said, all right, I'll tell you what I'm going to put on the test, which was logical with all that material. And I said, anything else you remember, I'll let you list as extra credit. And I'll give you extra credit points in for every 3 things you have in addition to what I ask you. And it was amazing how many things they could remember that I hadn't asked them. So when we
you must
got
have been
up,
a pretty good teacher.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I said, now, when we got up to the end of the Dayton flood, and Arthur Morgan came in to build the dams, I said, now I'm going to ask you to name all 5 dams. And now they get this stricken look on their face, and they said, how are we going to do that? I said, well, I don't have any trouble remembering Taylorsville because I'm within a mile of Taylorsville. And I seldom forget Englewood because I'm within about 3 or 4 miles of Englewood. And I have, my cousin's family lives down close to Germantown Dam,
Yeah.
and Huffman's over close to Wright-Patterson. But I said, the one I have trouble with is Lockington. So I went up to Lockington one
See,
afternoon.
there's 5, right?
Yeah, right. And I'll give you an easy way to remember that in a minute. And so I went up to Lockington, and there's a little tiny town up there named Lockington, not too far from Piqua.
Yeah.
So and the kids said, now you're going to ask us to name those 5? I said, yes, but there's an easy way. Remember the word length.
Length.
Length. And I said, if you look at each letter, they represent a dam. The L is for Lockington. The E is for Englewood. Now, when you get to an N, don't put anything down for N, because that's nothing. None of our 5 start with an N. Now, there is a Norris
Now, that
Dam.
really throws you.
No, it won't here in a minute. Because now there's a Norris Dam, but that's not one of our 5.
Yeah.
All right, the GTH is Taylorsville, Germantown, and Huffman. Taylorsville, Germantown,
Okay,
and
well, I'll just put
Nothing for N.
Yeah.
T.
And I said,
Yeah, well,
now,
LEGTH doesn't make a word, so we gotta stick that in.
the N has to be in there. That's the reason, yeah. And I said, now,
That's a good trivia question, if anybody can name all 5 dams.
all 5
sometime.
dams.
Harshman.
And, let's see, Huffman was named
Or
after...
Huffman, I put,
Huffman, I can't, he's one down in Woodland Cemetery that's got a great big monument. Isn't Huffman sitting on a big marble chair
I don't know.
someplace as you're going in
who
off
was he?
of...
Well, they
can't-
talk about Huffman Prairie where the Wright brothers
Yes,
lived.
yes.
So
yeah.
he was probably a big
a big-
landowner, or maybe he was a judge, I don't know.
But there was a little town named Taylorsville down
Mm-hmm.
and that washed out with the flood, so I've heard. And, let me see.
Yeah,
Well, the
theoretically,
rest of them were just sort of named after their places
Yeah,
where they
right.
were.
theoretically, Merlin Heights was Chambersburg,
Yes.
and they changed
That
that in honor of a conductor that rode the
Oh, really?
interurban. Yeah, his name was Mr. Merlin.
Oh, now that I hadn't heard.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you knew how Vandalia got its name then, don't you?
Well, what's your story?
We've got
Well-
3 stories.
Oh, well, now the one that I was telling the kids, I said, now I live at Vandalia, which they knew, and I said they wanted to make a road from the east coast to the west coast. So the national road goes from somewhere close to Baltimore west to somewhere was it close to San Francisco or something? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And I said, all right, so it's going this way. And I said, and then they came along with the Dixie Highway, which goes from northern Michigan down to southern Florida. And where they crossed, that's where Vandalia gets its nickname, the Crossroads of America.
Yeah, but see, some of the others are kind of swiping that.
All right, now, and they said when they started out from the East Coast in Maryland, they said we've got enough money to build the national road to Vandalia, Illinois. And when they got to this one certain location in Ohio, they ran out of money. And somebody said, well, we said we had enough to go to Vandalia, so we're going to call this spot Vandalia.
Have you heard that one?
No,
Well, no, that's the only one I have ever heard.
Oh, well, Phil, you'll have to tell her.
So, but that's the one that I told the kids, I said, no, I can't prove that this is right,
No,
but
I
this
know.
is...
We can't prove any of them,
yeah,
really.
that's right.
The three that I've got is that one
Born.
Do you know that?
I've heard Ray Beverly,
Yeah.
but I didn't know he was
They were
close.
very active in church work, and Mrs. Beverly was one of my Sunday school teachers when I was a little kid, and she used to help with Bible school. They lived out on West National. I don't know whether their house is still out there or not, before you get to Dogleg, or before you get to Peters Pike. They lived on the south side of 40. They had three daughters.
I think all those
Oh, a lot of
homes
those
have
houses are
all
gone.
been
Been
moved
gone
down
because of the airport, I
on
suppose.
Peters or down on
Okay,
Stone Court.
okay.
Yeah, there's none there anymore. I
Oh,
don't know
golly,
which
now I'd
ones.
forgotten about all of that. But Granddad belonged to the IOOF. He was quite active in that, and the Masonic
Well, all
Lodge.
we got left of that is a big old hunk of cement that says IOOF on it.
Oh, heavens.
Yeah,
And he
that's
and Dad were both members of the Lions Club when
Yeah.
that got started. And Granddad, I think, was the secretary for a
Well,
while.
Emmy Morton
Oh, yes.
has
Yeah.
told Phil
Oh,
about
yeah,
starting
I've
it.
got Emmy on
He said they
tape.
tried to get him to, said they needed 25 members. He said, we haven't got that many people in the town.
Oh,
You know how
heavens.
Emmy is. He's a,
Oh, is he down at Otterbein now?
no,
No, he's living
no,
on
he's still-
Ranch.
he's
or
still-
Oh, he's still
Ranch
there on
View.
Ranch View.
Yes,
Oh, my gosh.
and
Yeah.
he's pretty good shape.
Oh,
Yeah, he's in
good.
good shape. He's 80.
Phil goes to Lions Club with
Oh,
him.
my
They
He'll
take
be
gosh.
turns
87, I
driving.
think, in
He's still
November.
driving.
Oh,
What?
my heavens.
What?
Yeah, he's going to be 87 in November.
Is that when his birthday
He's
is?
10 years older than I am.
Yeah, I know.
From May to November.
Now he's
Oh.
10 years older than you are. What you
Now,
got written down here?
Pardon?
What is your book here?
Just my notes of what goes on during the day. I started this,
Can I look at it?
sure, way back when I was in the hospital.
Just a log.
They
Here,
said,
I looked at this. I thought you had a hypodermic needle.
Did you
Oh, you're,
have anything to do with the Vandalia State Bank? Do you know anything about it?
my great-grandfather, now that I think is J.K. Booher,
that's neat though.
Vandalia State
had
Bank.
something to do with the bank. Now, I can't
Who
think.
did?
J.K. I think his name was Jonathan Kent. All I ever heard him call him was J.K. Booher. Now, that was his wife was in Sunderland, and I believe her name was Della. But when Granddad was getting up in years and they needed another bank director, that's when Dad got involved in the bank. So he was on the
Board or
board
something.
for quite a while. And I can't remember who the president was at that time, but there was a Mr. Pleister here for a long time. And they were real nice people. I don't know, he'd be gone, I think, by now. I don't
Oh,
remember
gosh,
where
yes.
they went. Oh, gosh, that's been a long time
Was
ago.
was the E.P. Larsh Mansion built when
Oh,
you were-
yes, yeah, and the Sunday school from what was United Methodist Church at that time, it's United Methodist now, United Brethren, is what I meant to
Yeah.
say.
United
You-
Brothers.
They would have their kind of a fall carnival down there at the
Oh,
Larches.
really?
Yeah,
Oh, is that right?
and because it was a huge, big area back in there.
That wasn't anything that's Shirley Couch wrote, was it, on the...
Now, I don't think they were here when that was going
Well,
on.
but she did the history, you know.
Well,
in the
that's
church.
true too, that's true
Yeah,
too, yeah.
she did the history on the EUB church.
Yes,
And
yeah.
up until it became United Methodist. I just wondered if it had been built.
Do you remember him? Did you know him? E.P. Larson.
E.P. Larson.
Just by name only. I wouldn't have known him if I had seen him.
Yeah.
But they had such pretty swans and stuff down in there. Then have you ever been out on Wheelock Road past where Smedley's live?
Yeah.
And see the llamas and the peacocks out there?
Oh, I didn't know he had peacocks and
I
llamas.
didn't know that.
We used to go out there and see the Christmas decorations.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I didn't know he had. Now he's still living, isn't he?
I imagine.
I think
I
so.
think he is.
Diane is billing in the phone call on line 1.
It was north of the house, between their house and 71, I think.
571.
571, yeah. And they tell me that the Corn Fritter Inn over at West Milton had to close up recently.
Yes.
And that used to be one of the favorite places for the gun club people to go. They just loved going
We
over
went up there for we've been married 56 years.
Yeah.
This is what this was in March. And we went up there for our 50th anniversary. And took a bunch of family up there and had a meal. And it closed shortly after that. It's been
They had
closed. Now
such a
there's
nice salad bar.
And that's such a
and everything.
nice big old house.
Oh,
And
yes.
it's some kind of plumbing business or
This is
something.
what I was going to ask you. I don't
Yeah,
remember
that's
what I
in
heard
there.
them say that
Yeah,
it was now.
it's
It
a
didn't make
shame.
any sense,
No,
really.
it's a shame because that was a pretty
Yeah.
place.
As far as you know, was Yemi's Motel the first motel in
Yes,
Vandalia?
yeah.
Okay.
Out there west of town on the south side of the Dixie, across
Yeah.
from the gun club.
Yeah.
Well, now, wait a minute. Harold
Well,
Brussman
now
had a little motel
Right
there.
in town.
Yeah,
At,
right up close to where the bank is.
Maple, yeah,
Yeah,
Maple
Maple,
Street.
yeah.
Yeah, and that was, what was that called, do you know?
I don't
Because
remember.
didn't Dittmer's have a little coffee shop there?
There was a little coffee shop right on the
I'm
corner.
thinking Dittmer's run that.
I think Harold Brussman ran it. Now,
Well,
the
maybe
reason I
they
know
just-
I know there was one in there because one real cold night in,
I remember it there, but
oh heavens, I can't think what month it would have been. Granddad had gone to the Lions Club. Dad was out of town on a business meeting. And Grandmother and I were there, when Mother had gone with him, and Grandmother and I were there by ourselves, and she said, let's go down to the motel, and that's the one you're talking about, or the sandwich coffee shop,
yeah,
and get
it's
supper.
kind of a coffee shop.
And while we were sitting in there was a little black and white dog, kind of a spaniel type dog, sitting. It was so cold that night, and there were just a few snowflakes, and this little black and white spaniel type dog was sitting outside on the sidewalk, and she was just looking in the window at us. And Grandmother said, now don't you talk to that dog when we go out. And I said, oh no, I wouldn't think of it.
Want to go with you?
Yeah, and so when we got out, well, I stopped and talked to her, and she followed us home up the street, which was only about a block. And I said, now she
Well,
can't,
these will Frank make sense out of these.
well,
Well,
I
this
said,
can help it.
Yeah.
she can't stay outside tonight, it's too cold.
Oh.
Well, Grandmother said, what are you going to do with her? I said, well, we had a closed-in back porch where we mixed all the dog food for Dad's hunting dogs that we had out in the barn in the kennel. And I think there must have been 3 out there. And I said, well, I'll put a big cardboard box in under the table there on the back porch and put a blanket or a rug in it. And she made herself right at home. And I knew when Dad got home, I thought that dog's not going to last very long.
Aw.
And so I had till Sunday, and she made herself right. And the strange part about it was she was housebroken. So I don't know where she had come from. Never did find out. And so I came home. This was on Thursday, and I said, now I'll come home tomorrow. I was only about 5 minutes walk away because I went out to Morton for that year for school. And so I came home and took her out and put her back in on the porch, and she was right at home. And when Mother and Dad got home, the first thing he said was, no, we're not running a dog kennel. And he said, we got 3 dogs out in the kennel. He said, we're going to have to. I said, well, it wouldn't surprise me. He said, and Mother said, no, I think maybe Margie Ate-A-Lot would take her. And she lived out off of Peters Pike on Hurtline Drive. And so she called Margie, and Margie said, yes, she'd take her. So she came and got her while I was at school one day, which I thought was pretty sneaky, but that's the way they did it.
Well, he pointed out.
Yeah, and so Margie had her she had her for about 4 or 5 days, and by golly, she came home. She came back to the house.
I'll be darned.
And I think she came back once, and then Margie came and got her, and she took her back out off of Peters Pike there, close to Old 40. And by gosh, she took off the second time and came back, and I was home that day. I thought, by golly, there's more than one way to kill a cat here. So, and I saw her going across the side yard up onto the porch, and I called to her, and I had read, my aunt had gotten me a book by a man named Albert Payson Terhune. He ran a big collie kennel in New Jersey. Now, this has been years ago.
I know your memory amazes me.
Yeah, mine too.
And so he had written a book called A Dog Named Chips that was not a collie at the time. But that Chips had become, it was a stray and had walked into whether the Terhunes took this dog in. So I thought, now there's the name for this dog because the story seemed to fit pretty well. And so I started calling her Chips, and my gosh, that dog took to us, and she became a house dog. And when Mother and Dad walked in that next Sunday, and she's sitting in the middle of the living room floor, he said, "We're not running a dog kennel." So that's when Margie came and got her the last time, and then she came back after about 3 days. She took off, and she came, and Dad said,
She
"Well,
liked you.
if she likes it that well here," well, he said, you can keep her. So then I got into college, and I said, "Now, you're not getting rid of her while I'm gone, are you?" No, they wouldn't. So I'd come home on weekends from down at Oxford, and a lot of times Granddad was still living, and he and Mother and Grandmother would ride down and then bring me home. Well, by that time I could drive home then myself for him, and I did a lot of driving for him after he got up in years. And so she would meet me at the door, but she didn't offer to run away. And she went in the car with me, and when Granddad would go down into the river, what they call the river bottoms down there, past where Springers lived, you can't get down in there now because the roads aren't fit. But she'd ride in the car, and then we'd get out, and there was a creek down in there where I could do a lot of this butterfly and dragonflies and that kind of stuff, catching. And I'd go out to the gun club then in the fall.
Get the butterflies drunk.
Yeah, right. Nothing worse than the drunk butterfly. And so she liked to go down in there and wade in the water and this sort of thing. And I'd find cocoons down in there, and I found cocoons out at the gun club in the maple trees.
Oh, yeah.
And bring them in, and I had a big wire cage that I put them in then in the winter, in the fall, and leave them out all winter like they would normally be. And Wayne had taught me this. When they hatched out then, he used, I think it was carbon tetrachloride to put them to sleep. And I had a huge big display of butterflies and moths. And down where, now not Jan's Florist, it's the ones east of town on the south side of the street.
Okay.
You know where I mean?
Yeah, right there by the bank.
Across from the bank. Paul Freeman was the druggist.
Yeah, remember you had a soda fountain in there.
Yes, and he had a real nice drugstore in there, and I went in there one day, and he had a pipe rack on the wall that was empty. And I said, "What are you going to do with that?" Well, he says, "That's junk." I said, "Would you get rid of it?" Well, he says, "I'm going to junk it." I said, "Well, if I could have it for an insect display case," because it had a neon light across the top.
No.
And I had that for years. I don't know whatever happened to it. But I had all these then. I put, now it wasn't plywood, but some kind of soft cork backing, in there.
Oh, yeah.
And I could pin them in there, the cocoons and all. And then one year in a catalog, I found a table that was probably, not as big around as this round table is, but if you could take a half of this and make a square out, or a rectangle out of it. It had a glass top, and it was about this deep, and I could
put them underneath there.
I could lay them in there, and had a display case that way. And then when we lived uptown, we started off with a coal furnace, and when we changed over, Granddad changed over to, was it oil first or gas first? I don't remember. Anyway, whatever he did, we took the furnace out, and then the coal bin was an extra room in the basement. So that was kind of my corner. And that's where I had this big display case that I got from Paul.
Do you know that, do you remember the little bazaar there?
Oh, yes. Oh,
Well, you know that house, our church, we go to the Lutheran church there, and we bought that property. And that house was one of the first houses in Vandalia to have running water.
Oh, it was.
They had a big tank up there up in the
Edith
attic.
Baby and
There was 2 big horse tanks up in the attic.
Oh, my gosh.
And they had a windmill out back that pumped the water up to this tank.
Yeah. Oh, goodness.
Yeah, a lot of people I don't think knew that.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we haven't worn you out.
You haven't worn me out one bit. This is
good.
interesting.
Now what?
Now, Edith Eby took, after the war was over, the acreage that Granddad owned back in there by Maple Street, the government came in and they said, now, we're not going to buy this, we're just going to take it and put in this temporary housing. And Granddad was a little unhappy with it, but you had no choice. They wanted it, and they came in and they took it. So they built these little four apartment strips of housing in there.
Yeah.
And they were in there for a long time.
So your granddad,
Rader.
owned that property?
Yes, yeah. He and Evan Cool, I think, C-U-L-L, owned part of it back in there. And their house was there on East Dixie. Oh, goodness, I can't think across. I don't know whether the house is still there. I don't think it is. But it says you go back past the Catholic church. They live close in there.
Oh, back in there.
Yeah.
Where?
But, and then...
So the government just come in there and said,
we're taking it, period. Yeah. But when the war was, after all that was out of there, and they didn't need, because these people were coming up from the south to work at Era Products for war stuff. And so then they came in and they took it all out, including the slabs that they used for the flooring.
Well, it seemed like a lot of people, in Vandalia started out there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's,
Yeah, I know Vernon Ozell Francis.
That's been a long time ago. Oh, my goodness.
That was after the war.
After the war. That labels you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, gosh, you're not as old as we are.
Yeah, but
we're 10 years older than you are.
Well.
See, I was thinking you were older than you were.
Yeah.
Just when, I never really knew you, but when they talk about you, I thought, well, she's an old lady.
Yeah,
no, really, I thought you were older than we were until we started talking about it.
And then I was trying to think, I don't know if you remember Frank Whitmer. He used to be a barber in town.
Yeah.
And Norma, now I guess Norma used to work at Hawks for a long time.
Yeah, Phil worked for General Motors, and their son was the doctor there.
Oh, Dick or Richard,
Richard,
yeah. He was kind of a character.
Yes, yeah.
Are you here for just kind of to...
that's one after I found out that these Harry and Mary Campbell, well, Harry had died next door to me at home, and Mary was getting up in years, and the house was getting to be too much for her to take care of. Now she was they were in between me and Charlie Owen. And the lady down the street, a Mrs. Ziegler, was a real good friend of hers, and she came past one day when I was out on the porch, and she came in to visit, and she said, Mary's getting ready to sell the house. And I said, you're kidding. And she said, no, she's got the sign ready to put out in the front yard. And I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder who will get that, because the yards were right there together. And then I found out that Mr. Odell was very concerned because he was on the other side. And he told me he said, I don't know who's going to get that house, but he said, I'm concerned that we get good neighbors. And I said, well, I think I know who's going to buy it. And he said, who? And I said, well, I know some folks that came up from Virginia. And if you can picture Virginia, there's a point that sticks out between Kentucky and Tennessee. And there's a couple of little towns in there. One is Pineville, but that's not right. But one is, I went totally blank. Isn't that awful?
No, I think you've done pretty good.
I think you've done great.
Oh, Big Stone Gap.
Oh, is
And-
that where you see
and
all the,
Pennington Gap. Pennington Gap is the first town you come to as you go start in that handle that sticks out to the west. And then Big Stone Gap is the next one. And so anyway, a man and his family came up from Big Stone, and he got a job at the Methodist Church, that when we were still up on the, no, this is when we were down across from Morton's funeral home there.
yeah.
And I had no idea who they were, but when we did this sewing once a month that I went to, Ron would always come in and eat lunch with us. And my mother had died, I think, by that time. And, well, Welcome and all of them were still living there, or living. And I would go up and help them talk, like I always said. And so Ron would come in and eat lunch with us. And I'd take stuff for all of them. And I'd give him a couple things left over. I said, you could take one home and give it to Elsie. And then they had two daughters that both had been married, but they were both divorced by that time. And their younger son, who just got married, was still a little kid. He was like 5th or 6th grade. And their older son, who's over at East Dayton now, he was...
That name sounds familiar. I just wonder how old would those boys be? It seems like one.
Fleeners? Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. Mark would probably be in his 30s, I'm going to guess, and Tim would be probably early 20s now, something like that.
Kids. I just thought maybe they might have
But
been.
we got acquainted, and the morning I fell down at home, the first time, when I got up out of bed, everything started moving. And the bed was about, a foot away from the wall, and I had no place to go but down on the floor because I couldn't get turned around and sit back on the bed fast enough. So I went forward on my knees, and I heard a key in the back door. This was timed like you wouldn't believe.
I'll be
And
down.
I had given Ron a key. We had gotten acquainted. And he said, you're by yourself, aren't you? And I said, yes. And he said, well, Elsie and I got to talking it over, and if you ever needed help, we wouldn't know how to get in. So I thought, well, I don't like giving just anybody a key, but I did trust them. And I still do. And so he said, if you don't mind us having a key, that'd be, might be a good idea. Well, by golly, he said he had this strange feeling that I needed some help that morning. And so just as I hadn't been on my knees, I don't think 2 minutes till I heard the key in the back door. And when he came in, he called.
At least you didn't black out.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
And it was the start of all this trouble.
Okay.
And because it threw your balance off.
Uh-huh.
So he said, well, I don't know what to do. I said, well, I don't know what to do either, and I couldn't really crawl out of there quite at that point because I didn't know why I was going to get up in the first place. So I don't remember whether he called Elsie, and I don't recall whether one of them got behind me, but anyway, and I didn't have any idea about a walker, and Welcome Smith had a walker that she used all the time that folded. And I thought I'd never seen a folding walker before, and I thought, now if I ever need a walker, I'm going to get a folding one. So by gosh, wouldn't you know. Well, anyway, they got me up off the floor. I don't remember whether they slid a chair in behind me. But anyway, I got up on something and got my bearings again. And they said, well, and I said, I don't know what happened, but my balance just went way out. Your head was kind of floating around. So then that's when they got me appointment with, I was going to Ken Weldy, and then Dr. Kurth, after Ken, went down to Mima Valley, I think. And then, they said we're going to Dr. Kirsch on the south side of 40, west of the traffic light there in town, back in those red medical buildings that they've got there now. Lois, I think was her name, Lois Kirsch. Anyway, she was real nice, and then Ron and Elsie were going to Mark Couch. And so after all this head mess I had, they said it would be so much simpler if I'd change over to Mark Couch, and I had known him since he was a kid. In fact, Dad helped him and 2 or 3 other high school kids when they were working on outdoor and hunting and fishing merit badges for scouts. and they'd been down to the house any number of times for whatever he did with them. And they'd go to the basement, and he'd take them through these merit badge requirements that they needed.
Yeah,
And so that's how I started to go to Mark.
Okay.
And
Is he still your doctor?
he's still my doctor, yeah. Although I was going to Ken Welding when we were doing the head deal.
Yeah.
So
you hope you'll get to go home pretty soon?
they come home, I think they said, this is Friday. Okay, they're either coming home tomorrow or Sunday, and I think I'll be going home maybe Sunday or Monday, I hope.
Oh. Well, I'm glad we got up here and talked to you.
I'm glad you got up here too, and I was trying to think of anything. Wish Orville Blue was still living, because
He's
you
too
would
old.
he would be he would know all of these things about
And
way back.
he didn't have any relatives. And you don't have any close relatives.
The closest I have now, I have one blood aunt, a Doris Bence, and that would have been Dad's younger sister. And Uncle Kenny and Aunt Jessie are both gone, and Dad's gone, of course. And Aunt Doris taught at Belmont kindergarten for, 30-some years, I think. And she was at Cardinal Village, and I'm not too sure she's not at Bethany now.
Oh.
But I haven't talked